Matthew chapter 28 is where we are. I don't know about you, but I am not a big movies person. I watch maybe one or two movies a year. I don't ever have the gumption to sit through 2 hours of a movie and get involved in some story I don't know, and I just don't follow movies very much. I watch one or two a year, like I said. And even when I do watch them, half the time I forget them. I don't even remember that I had watched them, right? So movies aren't really a big thing to me. But if I do ever watch a movie, it's often based on a true life sort of thing. I like stories that are based on real incidents. And so watch a movie, and oftentimes at the end of the movie they provide that little epilogue kind of thing, right? You watch the whole show, and then but just before the credits come on, you get this little bit that says, Johnny went on to teach school in Tanzania for 30 years or something, right? Like you get the rest of the story about what happened after the story that you just watched. I think a lot of times we approach the resurrection kind of like that little epilogue bit at the end. The main story's over and here's just the rest of it, you know? I think a lot of times we treat the main story as sort of the part from where Jesus was born until he's crucified. And we know that part really well. We talk about those things a lot. And we know his teaching, and we focus on those things all the time. And a lot of times in my experience in the church, it sort of seems like the resurrection is just that little bit on the end that says, oh, and by the way, he didn't stay in the tomb. Oh, and by the way, he did rise from the dead. Oh, by the way, here's the happy ending bit to the rest of it. But it's just the bit that we kind of skip over. Just the little add-on at the end. If you don't think that's true, let me show you something. This is my sermon ideas folder. I've had this folder since 1987. I took it from Wawota Church of Christ. It was my ideas folder the first summer I preached in Wawota, and it's a little worse for wear. But this is where I come up with all my sermon ideas. I just take a sheet of paper and I scribble down a thought or an idea or a quote or a scripture or something, and then every week I just dig through this folder and I see what fits together and what works together and what might make the next sermon. That's where that all comes from. This week, when I started to get ready for my sermon on the resurrection, I went through all my ideas in here. There's probably several hundred ideas. Guess how many I had written down about the resurrection? None. None. Like, I've been gathering ideas for since 1987, and I've got nothing on the resurrection. Again, it's one of those things that we just kind of either take for granted or we add as the little ending to the story. Jesus died, oh yeah, but he rose again. But it's never really our focus, and unfortunately, I think that's a problem. I don't think that's a good thing. I think I know why we do it, though. I think we know why we do it, and that's simply because we don't have a parallel for the resurrection. We don't have anything that connects to it. We don't know what it looks like. We talk about Jesus' birth, and we understand birth. And we talk about his teaching, and we understand when he says, turn the other cheek, don't be jealous, do the right things, blah, blah, blah. We get all that stuff. And then when we get to the resurrection, we've got no parallel. We don't know what it means. We can't relate to it in some way. And so maybe we leave it off because of that. But I want to tell you that when we do that, it's really costly to us. The resurrection shouldn't be the little tag-on bit that we just kind of say, oh yeah, by the way. In fact, it should be, as Ron prayed in his prayer, our ultimate focus. It should be the thing that defines who we are. It should be the thing that we think about every single day. I think the resurrection needs to be something that is thought about in our lives every single day, not just at Easter, not just at funerals, but all the time. We need the resurrection every day for at least 3 reasons, and I want to give you 3 quick ideas today. Number 1, I think you need to think about the resurrection every single day because it will remind us that there's more going on than what we see. It'll remind us that there's more going on in our world and in the spiritual world, in our lives. There's bigger things going on than what we see or can know or can touch or can feel or can think about even. Matthew chapter 28 tells us that. Matthew 28 starts off with Jesus having been crucified and put in the grave hastily on Friday night just before the Sabbath shows up. Sabbath starts on Friday evening, and you cannot work from Friday evening until Saturday evening, and then it was dark. And so the ladies who had been Jesus' friends are now on their way on Sunday morning to go and prepare his body to be in that tomb forever. And you can imagine how they feel as they go out there, right? You can imagine how they're doing. They think their friend is gone. All of their hopes are gone. Their hope that he was maybe the Messiah, the Savior they were looking for, is gone. Their hope that he was going to be someone different and change everything for them, that's all gone. Everything is shattered. Death has killed their hopes and their dreams. And so on Sunday morning as they go out to the tomb, on Sunday morning as they go out to do what they were going to do, their talk is only about how are we going to get the stone rolled away? How are we going to get into the tomb? How are we going to do the job we need to do and then leave? Because all they want to do is go home. Everything in their life has been shattered. And they see nothing hopeful. But Matthew 28 verse 1 says this. After the Sabbath, on the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for the angel of the Lord came down from heaven and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were as white as snow. The guards, by the way, the Romans had put 2 guards at the tomb to make sure nobody came and stole the body and pretended that maybe he'd risen from the dead. The Roman guards, it says, were so afraid of him, of the angel, that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He's not here. He is risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay, and then go and tell his disciples, he is risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy. To these 2 women who have no concept of anything great happening on that day, everything has been shattered in their life. They need to know that there's something bigger going on, and they find that out in some really interesting ways. I want you to look at the words that Matthew very quickly describes the scene with. He says that these women who are so discouraged and thinking, oh, everything is done and nothing good can happen now, and there's no other result other than just to say goodbye to their friend one last time. Matthew says, as they were going, there was an earthquake. That would have been big enough to shock their day. That would have been interesting enough. But he says there was an earthquake, and there was an angel, and there was a rolled back stone. And that angel looked like lightning, and he was white as snow, and the guards were like dead men. They were so scared, and the angel said, "Come into the tomb and see where he was." There's more going on than what they understood. They didn't get it yet, but God was at work, and something was going on, and something bigger was happening. And even though no one expected this, it happened anyway. And I love that idea. I've talked about that a great deal probably, but I'm going to keep talking about it because we need a sense that there's something going on that you don't see. There are plans in the works that you don't understand. There is more going on than what you know. And that's what these women find out that morning, and that's what we need to find out as well. That God has plans that you don't even know about yet. That there's more out there than what you see. I think we need to be convinced of that, because if life just boils down to what I can control or what I can understand or what I can do, then I'm pretty hopeless sometimes, because lots of times I can't do anything. But if it's true that there is resurrection hope, that there is something going on that I can't see, that God has plans and can do things I wouldn't even dream about, then I always have hope. I can always feel like there's something going on here. I can pray and trust that something better can happen. I think we need that understanding spiritually. And I think we can get that understanding by looking at other things too. Do you realize that there's actually a lot more going on even physically than you understand or know? I came across a story 2 years ago now, 3 years ago. Headline of the story from CTV News says, take a look at the 71 new species that scientists discovered in 2019. So there's a whole story here. I see one of these every year, so I just saved the one from 2019. But it says that scientists every year are finding more and more animals that they never knew existed. More and more creatures that they never figured out were there before. So in 2019, they found 71 of them, including this sea slug. I like how they put this. This is just a screenshot from the story, but I like the little byline underneath it. A stunning, new to science sea slug. I like how they wrote that. He didn't say a stunning new sea slug, because he's not new. He's been there forever. We just found him. I think it's interesting that after we've lived here this long and we think we know so much and we're so scientific and we understand so much about our Earth, I think it's interesting that we found 71 new species in 2019. In fact, in 2018, they found 229 species they hadn't found before. Since 2010, they found 1,375, and listen to this. Despite the dozens of new finds this year, biodiversity scientists estimate that 90% of the Earth's species are still unknown to us. 90% of the things on the Earth we still don't know, they figure. There's more out there than what you see. There's more out there than what you understand. There's more out there than what you know. There's more out there than what you can touch and feel. And there's more going on than what you understand. And that's a hopeful thing. And if that's true physically, it's got to certainly be true spiritually. If an angel shows up in Jesus' story, can you believe that angels are doing something with you? Can you believe that? Can you believe that that realm exists? Can you believe that your problems that are here right now are really just a vapor, or just really small? That this experience you're having is just a tiny bit of your actual experience? Because you're an eternal soul that will go on forever. This is just a little tiny bit of it. We need to think about the resurrection. We need to think about the afterlife. We need to think about what's coming next, because it reminds us that there's more coming than what we know or what we see. And in fact, that there's a God there doing something, which is good too. Which leads us to our second thought here. I think we need to, let me give you this too, actually. I forgot about this. Rick Atchley, a preacher down in the States, says this all the time. He says, keep your eyes open today, because God likes to do big things in quiet places where most are not expecting him to appear. Talked about that in Bible study this morning too, right? That lots of times God is at work when we don't understand it, we don't see it, we don't know it, until we look back later and say, I see what happened there. I was blessed in that moment, in that circumstance, in that thing. God was doing something here. We need to start thinking that way, because we are actually spiritual beings. We're not just physical ones. Second thing that the resurrection gives us is not only a hope and a different picture of something bigger, but the resurrection also, we need it because it gives us some words to remember. It gives us some good words to remember. And that's important, because the words we think about and dwell on, the words that swirl around in our minds, the way we think about things is actually formative. The way we think makes us the way we are. The way we think conditions the way we react to the things that happen around us. The way we train ourselves to think makes us act in certain ways. And so we need to think about what we're thinking about so that we are shaped properly. And so that we see the world properly, and so we see others properly, so we do the right things. Because the way we think actually affects us. The girls and I watch a TV show. I think I've told you about this before. TV show is called Portrait Artist of the Year. And they have these celebrity sitters come and they get their portraits painted by these artists who are trying to win a competition. And so they always interview the people that are sitting for the portrait. And they're always famous people. They're singers or politicians or authors or something. This last week, this lady was there, probably in her 60s or so. I don't know, something like that. They sat her down and interviewed her, talked to her a little bit. How are you? Blah, blah, blah. Have you ever had your portrait painted? Do you do any portraiture? Do you draw or paint or do anything? And the lady was a dancer. And so you might expect that she's into artsy sort of things. She might be an artist of some sort. And the lady said, no, I don't ever draw anything. I don't draw at all. When I was a little girl in school, I tried drawing, and my teacher told me I was terrible, and I've never done it since. And I said to Sarah, that was probably 50 years ago that her teacher told her she couldn't draw, and so she just gave up, because she's thinking to herself, 50 years later, she still hears those voices in her head that say, I cannot draw. I'm a terrible artist. I can't do that. So she just never did. The words we roll around in our heads are important. The words we roll around in our heads, the things we remember that others say to us are important because they shape how we look at things, how we think about ourselves, what we do, how we react, are all controlled by how we think about ourselves and what we've listened to that have been said to us. And so I think we need the resurrection because it gives us some words that we need to keep thinking about. It gives us some words to roll around in our heads once in a while. These are words you need to remember. When the ladies go up to the tomb and they see the stone rolled away, the angel's sitting there and he says to them, "Do not be afraid." Boy, if I could take one phrase and give it to myself as a present that would have changed how I went through the last 53 years of my life, "Do not be afraid" would have been a good gift. Because I've been afraid of a lot of things. And I've worried about a lot of stuff, many of which never even happened. In big and little ways. I was just telling Tom that Tom had come over to help me with my old car that I have. I broke a stud off in the head. He came and helped me get that out. So I was telling him this morning, I was saying to him, "Hey, I got my car put back together and it ran." And he's like, "Oh, that's really nice." And I said, "And guess what? All the things I'd worried about that might go wrong as I put it back together, none of them went wrong. Everything went back together." I've been spending 6 months thinking about all the things that could go wrong as I try to put this car back together. Not one of them went wrong. Everything went pretty easily, really. And that's one stupid little example, but I've lived my whole life thinking about what could go wrong because I've been told, I've heard the voice, I've listened to the idea that says you better worry about everything. What if I listen to the voice that the resurrection gives me that says, "Do not be afraid"? What if that's the thing that I heard? Do not be afraid. What if I heard the words, "He is risen"? What if that was the thought that went through my head more and more instead of other things? What would that redirect me to? If I lived every day of my life thinking that Jesus is risen from the dead, and he's going to come back someday, and this isn't really my home, and I have another home coming, would I worry so much about this place as I do? Would I be as concerned about gathering so many things as I am? Would I be worried about my physical security so much as I seem to be? Would I be thinking more about me or more about you? I think if I lived with the thought that he is risen in my head more often, if those were the words that I had, then maybe I would actually think less about me and more about you. Maybe I would think less about what I have and more about what's coming. Maybe I would think less about trying to compete with you, and I'd start thinking about how to help you. Maybe I'd stop thinking about how big my home is here and start thinking about the next home. Maybe I need the words he is risen to redirect my thinking so that I'm thinking about bigger things, about better things. Again, from Ron's prayer, about ultimate things. Things that actually matter. Maybe that's the word that needs to roll around in my head. I like the idea too that he said, I want you to go and see, and I want you to come in here and see where he laid and then go tell them. Go tell his disciples. Again, what if those were my words? What if my words were see and then tell somebody? What if I was actually concerned about seeing? What if I was actually concerned about seeing God, seeing Christ, seeing how that would look in my life, seeing how to live because of what I believe? What if I actually saw things better? And then what if I actually believed it was my job to tell someone? Like, I have to share this with someone. How many times did Jesus heal someone and he said to them, do not tell them? They told anyway because it was just too good to keep to themselves. What if my words were see it and then tell someone? I'd probably be more effective. I'd probably be more helpful. I'd probably be more kind. I would probably be more gracious and merciful. I'd probably be happier if these were my words. I think the resurrection gives us some words that redirect us from the things we often just focus on ourselves. These, by the way, are our words because they're not words of defeat. The women went out to that tomb that morning defeated, but we're not defeated. These are our words because they're our victory words. We are victorious regardless of whatever else comes. Bigger picture. One other reason why we need the resurrection, not only does it remind us there are bigger things going on, not only does it give us words, but one other thing it does is that it gives us a living Jesus. It gives us a living Christ. The Jesus of the Bible is interesting. You could go to church for 100 years just reading the stories of Jesus and talking about Jesus and thinking about Jesus and debating what he said and trying to figure out what he said. The Jesus of the Bible is interesting, no doubt. The Jesus of the cross was really brave. We're going to talk about the cross here in a minute. The Jesus that went to the cross was really brave, right? Prayed in the garden that he didn't want this to happen, but if it was what had to happen, then let's go. Pretty courageous. We're going to Jerusalem and I'm going to die. He knew what was happening. It wasn't even a surprise. Jesus of the cross is really brave. What we need, though, is not an interesting Jesus or a brave Jesus. We need a living Jesus. We need a Jesus that isn't just like Julius Caesar, who happened to live sometime and said something and did some other things, and we know about it. We need a Jesus that's still not in the tomb. We need a Jesus that's not just still dead. We need a Jesus who actually is alive and going before us. As the angel said to the women, look where he was. Look where he sat. Now, no, go and tell the people that he is going ahead of you into Galilee. We need a Jesus that we believe is alive and going ahead of us. We need an empty tomb because it gives us a living Christ, not just a historical figure back there. It's good to remember the resurrection, as I said, at Easter and funerals, but again, that's not enough. We need to be living with the thought of new life and new hope and new joy, and that death isn't the end, and that there's bigger things to be concerned about than dying, that there's bigger things to be concerned about than what we are normally concerned about. When we leave the resurrection just to a few days out of the year, then we're missing something really important, and we will never be who we ought to be. We have to live it every day, or else we will not be who we need to be. Every week as I read through different things, I'm always scanning different articles, looking for different ideas, things that I can use somewhere. As I was thinking about this idea of the necessity of living the resurrection every day, I was reading an article about a guy who was talking about why most people who try to learn a language fail to do so. He was saying most adults who go out and try and learn a language don't succeed, and he has a theory about it. He has a reason. Here's what he said. He said, here's what you ought to do if you want to learn a language. You need to spend your time actually acquiring the language, not just studying it. Those two are not the same things. And it's one of the reasons adult learners fail despite years of effort. They spend all their time reading about the language instead of spending the requisite time immersed in it. You hear what he's saying? He's saying if all you do is study how to speak French, you're never going to learn it. You've got to go and speak French to someone. When Sarah's sister went to Russia, what did she do? She watched the TV for hours on end because she had learned basic Russian, but she didn't know how to speak it. She didn't know how to listen to it. Didn't know how it went together. So she watched TV until she understood what they were saying. She immersed herself in Russian, and now she's fluent. They spend all their time reading about the language instead of spending the amount of time they need to be immersed in it. This is like trying to learn to drive by reading your car owner manual. Right? You don't learn to drive by reading the book. You learn to drive by getting behind the wheel. And I want to suggest to you that that's similar to what I'm trying to talk about this morning. That if resurrection is just us reading about it once in a while or thinking about it sometimes, then it's not really, our faith isn't really going to have much impact on us. But if every single day I'm saying there's something going on here that I don't see, but God's at work. And that's how I start every day. And if I start every day thinking, do not be afraid. He is risen. There's bigger things happening. And if I start every day thinking that I have the God of the universe walking with me, more than that, if I'm baptized, I have His Spirit living in me, then something bigger can happen. Something good can change. We must live each and every day with our new life and our new hope and our new story. We've got to be immersed in it so that it actually becomes our story. So one last detail of the resurrection that Matthew includes that I really like. Matthew says that they put Jesus into the tomb when it was dark. It was the end of the day. It was just about the Sabbath. The sun was setting. Put Jesus into the tomb in the dark. Spent all day Saturday in the darkness of their sadness, waiting for things to change. Come Sunday morning, it says that the women went out to the tomb at dawn. I want to suggest to you that they got their good news as the sun was coming up again. As the darkness was fading and they walked into the light, they got their good news. And I want to encourage you too, that we need to live in the light of that resurrection. Get out of the darkness of your fretting and out of the darkness of controlling your own life and out of the darkness of doing your own thing and walk into the resurrection light. Walk into a life that is filled with a God who's at work. Walk into a life that is headed somewhere bigger than this. The Apostle Paul says that if we did this, if we understood that, if we really understood what our faith looks like, then we would understand that if we live for the Lord. If we die to the Lord. We are the Lord's. That's who we should be. That's how we ought to be thinking. That's the important part. Jesus died, but most of all was raised. That's not just a little bit on the end. That is the important part. And that's the part we will remember as we remember His death, His burial, and mostly His resurrection today. Father, thank you that there is more going on than what we know. Thank you that you are walking with us, that you see who we are and where we are and what we're struggling with. That because your son lived here, he understands what it is to be tempted and sad, and he understands what it's like to be us. And so, Father, thank you for a high priest now that understands us. Thank you for the sacrifice that reminds us that you love us so much. But most of all, as we remember his body on the cross today, help us also to remember his risen body. Help us to remember that the cross wasn't the end, that it was just a stopping point. Help us to remember that this isn't all there is, but help us to live for a bigger life and something more important, a new home, in a new way, with your new life, given to us by Christ, in your Son's name. Father, help us not to tire of hearing this story. Help us not to have hearts that glaze over and say that we've heard about the resurrection lots and just pass over it, but help us to be impacted by it, help us to be lifted by it, help us to be inspired by the fact that the tomb was empty, and ours will be as well. Father, help us not to hurry past this, but help us to be shaped by it each and every day. Thank you for your Son's blood that bought us the redemption, and thank you for the new life that we get to live as well, both here and eternally. In your Son's name. Once again, we're thankful for those who are here. We're thankful for those who join and watch on video as well. Thank you for watching.